The wind howled through the empty streets of Elowen Town, carrying with it a deep sense of foreboding. It was as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to break the silence. It was just after midnight when the lights in the town square flickered and then went out completely. In the darkness, a strange, unsettling calm settled over the village. There were no sounds of crickets, no distant murmurs of life. The world seemed to have frozen in place. Sarah, a young journalist with a fascination for the unexplained, had always been drawn to the eerie tales of Elowen Town. For years, she had heard whispers of a curse that haunted the village, a curse that no one seemed to speak about openly. People claimed that once you entered Elowen, you couldn't leave, not without paying a terrible price. Sarah wasn't one to buy into superstition, but the reports of the town's strange disappearances intrigued her too much to ignore. Something told her there was more to this story than the town's quaint appearance suggested. She had arrived earlier that day, greeted by the charm of the town square, where the small shops were all closed for the night, and the cobblestone roads stretched endlessly into the horizon. The peaceful facade of Elowen stood in stark contrast to the ominous feeling creeping beneath it. It was as if the town were holding a secret that no one had dared to reveal. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the residents were hiding something, and the more she spoke to them, the more she realized they were afraid. Not of the town's history, but of the future. As Sarah walked down the narrow alleyways of Elowen, the quietness weighed heavily on her. Every footstep echoed through the empty streets as if the town was listening, waiting. She had come here to uncover the truth, but the deeper she dug, the more questions seemed to arise. The town's mayor, Thomas Hargrove, was known for his reclusive nature, and Sarah had heard whispers of his strange behavior in the past few months. His absence at public events and his sudden reluctance to speak to outsiders had only fueled the rumors that something was terribly wrong. It wasn't until she reached the town's old cemetery that the first strange event occurred. The moonlight illuminated the weathered gravestones as Sarah stood at the entrance, her heart pounding. There was an unease in the air, something she couldn't explain, but she knew she was being watched. She turned to leave when a figure appeared from behind one of the crypts. "Are you lost?" a voice asked, rough yet strangely familiar. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she realized it was the mayor, Thomas Hargrove, standing before her. He looked older than she had expected, his face drawn with lines of worry and exhaustion. His eyes, though, were wide with something else, something Sarah couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe, or was it something darker? He stepped closer, his footsteps slow and deliberate, his gaze never leaving hers. "Be careful in Elowen," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "There are things here that no one should see, things that shouldn't be remembered." Sarah took a step back, confused and unsettled by his cryptic warning. Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps from behind startled her. The mayor quickly turned, his expression darkening as another figure approached. "It's late, Thomas," the stranger said, his tone dismissive. The man who spoke was tall, with sharp features and a businesslike demeanor. He didn't seem afraid of the mayor, nor did he seem to acknowledge the ominous atmosphere surrounding them. "We need to talk." The mayor nodded once, his eyes flicking back to Sarah. "You shouldn't be here, young lady," he said, his voice suddenly firm. "Go back to your hotel. Elowen is not a place for outsiders." Confused and unnerved, Sarah hesitated, but she knew there was no turning back now. She had come to uncover the truth, and something told her this warning wasn't just about the town's curse. It was about something far more sinister. She nodded, turning away from the mayor and the stranger, but not before catching one last glance at their faces, both filled with a strange mix of concern and something else, something darker. That night, as Sarah sat in her small hotel room, the silence of Elowen hung heavily in the air. She couldn't sleep. The warning, the mayor's cryptic words, and the unsettling feeling in her gut kept her wide awake. Something was off about this town. The mystery was deeper than she had imagined. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the true story wasn't in the headlines. The real story was hidden in the shadows. The next morning, she woke to find that the entire town had vanished. At first, she thought it was a joke. Couldn't be true. But as Sarah wandered through the empty streets of Elowen, the truth became undeniable. There were no signs of life. The stores were shut, the homes abandoned, and the town square, once filled with energy, now stood eerily silent. It was as if the town had never existed at all. Sarah's heart raced as she tried to make sense of it. Where had everyone gone? And why was she the only one left? As she stood alone in the middle of Elowen Town, a chill ran down her spine. The truth was out there, but the question was, who would survive to uncover it? The haunting of the vanishing village, the mysterious disappearance of Elowen Town. Part 2. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she walked through the empty streets of Elowen Town. The eerie silence around her was suffocating. It was as if the entire town had simply been erased from existence. The air felt thick with something unnatural, and every step she took seemed to echo through the void. It was as if the very earth was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. She tried to remain calm, convincing herself that there must be an explanation. Maybe it was a practical joke, an elaborate hoax designed to scare outsiders like her. But even as the thought crossed her mind, Sarah knew deep down that there was no way this was just some prank. The town had disappeared, not a soul in sight. Her footsteps quickened as she moved toward the town square. The fountain, once a centerpiece of the village, now stood still, the water long dried up. The benches were empty, and the few remaining flowers in the garden had wilted, as though they hadn't been tended to in weeks. The absence of life was overwhelming, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something had been erased, not just from the streets, but from history itself. She pulled out her phone to make a call, anything to connect her to the outside world, but found that there was no signal. Her stomach sank as she realized that even the simplest of things had been taken from her. She was alone, completely alone. The eerie emptiness of Elowen left Sarah feeling as though the very ground beneath her feet was pulling her down. But she couldn't stop now. The mystery was far from over. She had to find answers. Why had everyone disappeared? And where were they now? As Sarah walked toward the edge of the town, the dense woods loomed in the distance, shrouded in a heavy mist that seemed to roll in from nowhere. The trees were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers against the gray sky. There was something ominous about them, as if they too were watching her every move. Without any clear direction, Sarah made her way toward the forest, hoping that maybe someone, anyone, might be there. Her mind raced as she tried to piece together the clues. She remembered her conversation with the mayor the night before, his warning about things best left uncovered. It echoed in her mind now, as she took one cautious step after another into the dense fog of the forest. The deeper she went, the heavier the air became. The stillness of the forest was unsettling, and Sarah couldn't help but feel as though something was following her. Her every instinct screamed that she wasn't alone. But when she turned around, the path was empty. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves beneath her feet. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Sarah ventured deeper into the woods. Her nerves were on edge, and her mind was beginning to race with wild thoughts. Was the town truly abandoned? Or was it something darker? Had the villagers vanished willingly, or had something more sinister come for them? And where was the mayor? His warning had been too strange to ignore, and now, more than ever, Sarah felt like she was walking into something far greater than she could have imagined. Then she saw it, a clearing up ahead. A small, dilapidated cabin stood in the center of the clearing, its windows boarded up and its door slightly ajar. It looked as though it had been abandoned for years, yet something about it called to her. Something deep inside Sarah told her that this cabin held the answers she was searching for. She approached cautiously, her heartbeat racing in her chest. The door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a dark, dusty interior. The air smelled of decay, and the floorboards groaned beneath her weight as she stepped inside. In the center of the room, there was a large wooden table, cluttered with old papers, books, and strange symbols carved into the wood. As Sarah carefully examined the table, she realized that the symbols were not random. They seemed to form a pattern, one that appeared to lead to something. Her eyes scanned the room, and she found the source of the mysterious symbols. An old journal, half hidden beneath a stack of papers. She reached for it, her hands trembling as she opened it. The journal was filled with cryptic entries, written in a hurried hand. At first glance, the writing seemed nonsensical, ramblings about the disappearing curse and the entity that waits. But as Sarah flipped through the pages, a chilling pattern emerged. The entries described strange rituals, forbidden pacts, and a hidden force that had been slowly taking hold of the town over the years. The author of the journal spoke of an ancient power that could erase entire populations from existence, one that could make a town vanish without a trace. And then, at the back of the journal, Sarah found something that made her blood run cold. There, scrawled in bold letters, were the words, "Elowen Town must be purged. The entity must feed. It is time for the cycle to begin again." A sickening realization hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't just some curse, it was a ritual. The villagers had known. They had all known. And now, Sarah had stumbled into something far darker than she could have ever imagined. The town's disappearance wasn't random. It had been planned. And she was right in the middle of it. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the cabin, and Sarah felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. She turned, and for the first time since arriving in Elowen, she felt the weight of something ominous closing in on her. She wasn't alone in this cabin. Something else was here with her. Before she could react, the door slammed shut behind her, and the room grew colder. The last words of the journal echoed in her mind. The cycle must begin again. And Sarah realized, with chilling certainty, that she was now part of the cycle. Sarah's pulse raced as she stood in the darkened cabin, the words from the journal still echoing in her mind. She wasn't alone. The chill in the air grew sharper, colder, as if something unseen was creeping closer, its presence suffocating. She could feel it, the oppressive weight of something ancient and malevolent, lurking just beyond her sight. The door slammed shut behind her with a force that rattled the walls, and the sound of it was like a final, irrevocable warning. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she spun around, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She had to get out. She had to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. It was as if the cabin had sealed her in, trapping her within its decaying walls. Her mind raced as she searched for an escape. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on the boarded-up windows. There was no way out. The weight of the journal's revelation, the cycle must begin again, loomed over her like a dark cloud. What did it mean? And why was she part of it? A sudden creak from the corner of the room caught her attention. She froze, every muscle in her body tensing as her eyes locked onto the shadowy figure in the corner. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, but as the figure stepped forward, the breath caught in her throat. It was a man, tall with dark eyes and a pale face, his features hidden beneath the shadows of the room. His clothes were old-fashioned, worn, and torn at the edges, as though he had been wandering for years. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her voice barely above a whisper, her body trembling with fear. The man didn't answer at first. He just stood there, his cold gaze fixed on her. Then, slowly he spoke, his voice low and almost haunting. "You don't belong here," he said, his tone filled with an eerie calm. "None of you do. Elowen doesn't let go." Sarah's mind reeled. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Where are the people? Where did they go?" The man's eyes darkened, and a slow, sad smile spread across his face. "Gone," he replied. "Gone where no one can follow. Gone where time doesn't matter. Where the entity feeds." The words sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She was no longer certain if this man was a person at all, or something else entirely. But before she could ask more questions, he spoke again, his voice sharp and cutting through the silence. "They came for you, Sarah. You're part of it now. You've stepped into a place where the rules are different. The cycle cannot be stopped." He took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "The town disappears every few generations. The people vanish to feed the entity. But you, Sarah, you've been chosen." "Chosen?" Her voice cracked. "Chosen for what?" "The cycle," he repeated, his voice growing colder. "You've been brought here to witness the ritual. The town is the offering and you are the final piece. The entity is hungry, and now it will feed. But before it does, it will take everything." Sarah's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of this nightmare. This man, whatever he was, seemed to know more than he was telling. He was part of it. He had to be. He had the same look in his eyes that the mayor had, the same fear, the same sense of inevitability. She couldn't let herself be consumed by this. She couldn't let the town be swallowed whole by whatever cursed force ruled Elowen. But she had to know the truth. What was this entity, and why had it chosen Elowen? What was its purpose? Before she could speak again, the man's expression shifted. A flicker of regret crossed his face, but it was gone in an instant. "You've uncovered too much," he said, his voice darkening. "There's no going back now. You've seen the truth. You've stepped into the cycle, and you'll be part of it, just like the others." Sarah's heart sank. She took a step back, shaking her head in disbelief. "No, this can't be happening. I'm not a part of this. I'm leaving. I'm getting out of here." The man reached for her, his hand cold as ice. "You can't leave. No one leaves Elowen. The cycle claims everyone who steps into it." Suddenly, a low, rumbling sound echoed from beneath the floorboards. It was a vibration, deep and resonant, like the sound of the earth itself groaning in pain. The man's eyes widened in terror, and he stepped away from Sarah, fear creeping into his expression for the first time. "It's too late," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "The entity has awoken. You've done what no one has done before, you've triggered it. It's coming." Sarah didn't wait to hear more. Her instinct took over, and she bolted for the door, her hands slamming against the wood as she struggled to open it. She pushed harder, her body shaking with panic. The door finally gave way with a creak, and she rushed out into the forest. But what she saw beyond the door stopped her cold. The trees were alive with movement, their branches twisting and reaching as if they were trying to grab her. The fog rolled in thicker now, swirling around her feet, and the air smelled of decay. The town, once visible behind her, was now shrouded in the thick mist. It was as if Elowen had completely transformed before her eyes, becoming something unrecognizable. A deep, unsettling growl echoed from the heart of the woods, and Sarah turned in the direction of the sound. Through the mist, she saw something moving. A figure, massive and shadowed, towering over the trees. It was no man. It wasn't human. The entity was here, and it was coming for her. The ground beneath Sarah's feet seemed to tremble as she stood frozen in the clearing. The fog rolled around her like a living entity, swirling and twisting in unnatural patterns, as if it was trying to pull her into the dark heart of the forest. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her mind racing. The figure emerging from the mist was monstrous. Too large to be human, too dark to be anything familiar. Its form shifted in the shadows, something far older, far more terrifying than anything Sarah could have imagined. As it moved toward her, the air grew colder, the sound of its steps muffled by the thick fog. Sarah's heart beat in her throat, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She tried to move, tried to run, but her legs felt as though they were made of lead. Fear gripped her with a suffocating force, making it impossible to escape. The creature, or whatever it was, stopped just a few feet from her. It towered over her, its features obscured by the fog, but its presence was undeniable. Its eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, bore into her, unblinking and cold. It spoke, its voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her bones. "You shouldn't have come here, Sarah," it growled, the sound thick with an ancient malice. "Elowen Town has been waiting for you, waiting for someone who would understand." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. What are you?" she whispered, barely able to find her voice. The creature's form shifted, and for a split second, Sarah saw something human, beneath the layers of mist. A pale face, twisted in pain, flickered in and out of view. It was the face of someone familiar, someone she had seen in the journal. The mayor, Thomas Hargrove. But there was no time to process this revelation before the creature spoke again, its voice growing louder, more forceful. "I am the cycle," it said, the words crawling under her skin. "I am what keeps this town alive. I am the force that takes, that feeds. The curse of Elowen is bound to me. And now you are bound as well." Sarah staggered back, her head spinning. She had heard the warnings, but this was beyond comprehension. The mayor, the villagers, even the town itself, it was all connected to this thing, this entity. And now she was a part of it. "No," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "I won't be a part of this. I won't let you. You already have." The entity interrupted, its voice cutting through her protests. "You are the final piece. You've awakened me, and now you will serve your purpose. Elowen Town has been chosen. You've walked into the ritual." Sarah's mind spun as she tried to piece together what she was hearing. The town, the disappearances, the strange happenings, it was all connected to this entity. But why her? Why had she been chosen? The creature seemed to sense her confusion, and its form twisted once more, the fog swirling around it in an almost hypnotic dance. "You are not the first to uncover the truth," it continued, its voice rising with dark satisfaction. "Many before you have tried, and all have failed. The town is built on secrets, on blood. But none have come as close as you, Sarah. You will be the one to end it, or you will become part of it forever." A cold shiver ran through Sarah's body as the weight of its words settled over her. She had come here to uncover the truth, but now, she was part of a much larger, much darker story. She wasn't just a witness to Elowen's mystery. She was its key, the final piece. The creature took a step closer, its eyes never leaving hers. "The town must vanish. It must feed. You will help it, or you will be consumed by it." Suddenly, Sarah felt a shift in the air. The mist seemed to thicken, and a strange energy pulsed in the ground beneath her. The town, Elowen, was alive with it. She could feel it in her bones, creeping through her veins like poison. It was as if the town itself was calling to her, urging her to succumb to the ritual. "No!" Sarah shouted, finding her voice. "I won't let you use me. I won't be a part of your game." With every ounce of strength she had left, Sarah turned and fled, pushing through the thick fog that seemed to cling to her like a living thing. Her breath was ragged, her heart pounding in her chest as she ran, her footsteps echoing through the trees. Behind her, the creature's growl echoed, a sound that seemed to chase her through the forest, each step more insistent than the last. But Sarah didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The town was not just a place. It was a trap, and she was the prey. She had to escape. She had to warn the world. There had to be a way out. Her feet stumbled on the uneven ground, but she pushed forward, knowing that if she stopped, if she gave in, it would be over. The ritual would be complete. Elowen would consume her, just as it had consumed everyone before her. And as Sarah reached the edge of the forest, She thought she saw something in the distance, something that made her stop in her tracks. A figure, a shadow standing just outside the trees. For a moment, she couldn't make out the details, but the silhouette was unmistakable. It was the mayor, Thomas Hargrove. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized he wasn't just part of the town's dark past. He was part of its dark future, and he was waiting for her. The haunting of the vanishing village, the mysterious disappearance of Elowen Town. Part 5. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she locked eyes with the figure standing just beyond the trees. There, in the cold, swirling fog, was Thomas Hargrove, the mayor. His face was pale, drawn, and his eyes held a dark, unsettling emptiness, as if his soul had been hollowed out by something much older and more sinister than the town itself. He didn't speak at first. He just watched her, his gaze piercing through the fog like a predator sizing up its prey. Sarah's heart raced as she took a step back, instinctively moving away from him. But every movement she made felt like it was in slow motion, as though the very air had thickened and trapped her in place. "Sarah," he said, his voice cold, almost mechanical. "You don't have to run. There is no escape. The cycle has already begun." A chill ran through her, colder than any winter night, and she found herself trembling despite her best efforts to stay strong. "How did he find me?" she thought. But then, as the fog parted slightly, she realized that the forest itself seemed to guide him, as though he belonged to it, was one with it. "I didn't choose this," she said, her voice shaking but defiant. "I came here to uncover the truth, to stop this." Thomas stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "The truth is that Elowen has always been a part of something much bigger than any of us," he said, his tone almost regretful, as if he had come to accept something horrific that Sarah still couldn't fathom. "We've always known it. The town has been feeding for centuries, taking what it needs to survive. And now, Sarah, it's your turn to contribute." Her pulse raced as she took another step back, but she could barely make it a few feet before the dense fog surrounded her, trapping her in place. The air was thick with a malevolent energy. It felt like the trees, the ground beneath her, and even the very sky above were all closing in on her, suffocating her. "No," Sarah gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "I won't let it happen. I won't become part of this curse." Thomas sighed, his expression softening for a brief moment, though the darkness never left his eyes. "You think you have a choice, but you don't," he said, his voice laced with finality. "You've already triggered it, Sarah. The cycle is complete and the town, the entity is hungry. It won't stop until it's fed. And now you are a part of it just like the others before you. You have to accept it." The realization hit Sarah like a freight train. The entity, it's real. This isn't just some old legend. This is happening right now. "No," she whispered again, the word barely escaping her lips. But this time she didn't mean it to herself. She meant it for the entity, for the town, for Thomas. She would not become a part of this nightmare. With every ounce of strength, she gathered the will to move, forcing herself to step back once more. The fog seemed to part, just enough for her to make a run for it. She didn't care where she was going, just away from him, away from this cursed town. Thomas reached out, his hand grabbing her arm, pulling her back toward him with terrifying strength. She struggled against him, but it was as though her body wasn't her own. The force of his grip was unyielding, and for a moment, she thought she might pass out from the sheer power. "You can't escape, Sarah," he said quietly, his voice filled with a resigned sadness. "There's nowhere to run. The town has already taken everything. It has already claimed you." Her heart pounded in her chest, but despite the overwhelming fear, something inside her burned brighter than ever. She could feel the weight of the town's curse pressing against her, but she refused to succumb. She was not going to let this ancient force take her. She wasn't going to let it win. With one last surge of strength, Sarah broke free from Thomas's grip, stumbling backwards into the fog. She could barely see through the mist, but she knew she had to get out of there. There was no other choice. And then she heard it. A low, guttural sound coming from the heart of the forest. A rumbling growl, one that echoed through the trees like a warning. The ground beneath her feet vibrated, and the air grew colder, the chill seeping into her very bones. Something in the forest was waking up. Something far more powerful than Thomas, more ancient than the town itself. It was the entity, the one that had haunted Elowen for generations, feeding off the souls it had claimed. It was coming for her. In a frantic panic, Sarah turned and ran, her legs screaming in protest as she pushed herself faster. She had no idea where she was going, only that she had to outrun the darkness that pursued her. She had to find the truth, the real answer behind Elowen, before it was too late. She could feel the entity's presence closing in, the air thickening with its power. It was everywhere, surrounding her, watching her every move. The trees seemed to lean closer, their twisted branches reaching for her as if to pull her back into the heart of the forest. But Sarah wouldn't let it happen. She kept running, determined to break free of this nightmare. She had no choice. She had to find a way to stop it, to end the cycle once and for all. Suddenly, the fog lifted, and Sarah stumbled into a clearing. Before her stood an old stone monument, worn by time but still standing strong. Her eyes widened as she recognized it from the journal. The symbol of the cycle, the ancient sigil that had been used to seal the curse. The answer was here. She had to stop the ritual. She had to destroy the seal before the entity could take her. But as she stepped forward, ready to destroy the symbol, she heard a voice, familiar, cold, and filled with a sense of finality. "You're too late, Sarah," Thomas said, his figure appearing in the clearing behind her. "It's already begun. You can't stop it now." And that's when Sarah realized the truth. There was no escape. The cold, oppressive air of Elowen Town pressed in on Sarah as she stood in the clearing, her back against the ancient stone monument that held the key to everything. The fog had thickened again, wrapping itself around her like a living thing, its tendrils reaching out to claim her. The ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm, as if the very earth was alive. Alive with the hunger of the entity that had haunted this town for centuries. Sarah's heart beat wildly in her chest as she stared at the symbol etched into the stone before her. It was ancient, the lines worn smooth by the passing of time, but it was still unmistakable. This was the seal, the thing that had kept the curse locked away for so long. The thing that had trapped the souls of the villagers in an endless cycle of darkness. The thing that had taken everything from her. She reached out, trembling, her fingers brushing the cold surface of the stone. She had to destroy it. She had to break the cycle, end the curse once and for all. But as her hand hovered over the symbol, a voice, dark and familiar, spoke from behind her, sending a chill down her spine. "You think you can end it?" Thomas Hargrove's voice echoed through the clearing, heavy with a sense of finality. "You think you can stop the cycle?" Sarah spun around, her breath caught in her throat as she saw him standing there, just beyond the fog. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed by something ancient and terrible, and his expression was one of quiet resignation. "You're too late," he continued, stepping closer, his voice low and filled with an eerie calm. "The cycle is already in motion. The entity has awoken, and no one, not even you, can stop it now." "Why?" Sarah choked out, her voice raw with disbelief. "Why are you doing this? Why did you let it happen?" Thomas sighed, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of centuries had finally crushed him. "I didn't want it to happen, but I had no choice. None of us did. The entity, it's not just a curse, Sarah. It's a force older than this town, older than time itself. It demands sacrifice. It demands souls. And Elowen has always been its vessel." Sarah's mind spun. So all these disappearances, All the people who vanished? They didn't leave. They were taken. Thomas nodded, his eyes darkening. Yes, the entity feeds on them, takes what it needs, and in return the town lives. The ritual has been going on for generations, long before any of us were born. Every few decades, a new group of souls is offered to it. And when the cycle is complete, the entity is fed, and it goes dormant for a time. But it always returns. It always needs more. Sarah shook her head, her mind reeling. And you, why? Why did you become part of this? Thomas's face hardened, and he took a step toward her. Because I had no choice. I thought I could stop it. I thought I could break the cycle. But every time we tried, the entity grew stronger. Takes everything. The mayor, the villagers, everyone who lives here. They're all part of it now. They are the offering. And you? He stopped, his eyes narrowing as he looked at her. You are the final piece. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized what he meant. The words from the journal flashed through her mind. The entity must feed. And now you are a part of it. She felt the weight of the truth crash down on her like a tidal wave. No, she whispered, shaking her head violently. No, I won't be part of this. I can't. But before she could finish, the ground beneath her feet began to shake. The monument in front of her trembled as if it were alive, the symbol glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. The air around her thickened, crackling with an energy that sent a shock through her entire body. No! Sarah cried out, stepping back as the earth trembled beneath her. I won't let you. The ground split open with a deafening roar, and from the opening, something black and formless began to rise. It was the entity. Its shape was not human, not even animal, but something far older, something that could not be understood. It writhed and twisted, its form stretching out like a dark cloud, filling the clearing with an overpowering sense of hunger. It was here, and it was waiting. Sarah's legs buckled beneath her as she fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the sheer presence of the creature. The air felt as though it were being sucked from her lungs, and she gasped for breath. The entity was feeding off of her fear, off of her very essence. But then, as if in response to her terror, she felt something inside her stir. It was a spark, a glimmer of defiance, of something more powerful than the fear that had been consuming her. She wasn't just a victim. She wasn't just part of the cycle. She had the power to end it. With every ounce of strength she had left, Sarah pushed herself to her feet. Her eyes locked onto the glowing symbol, the very source of this curse. The entity may have thought it had claimed her, but she would not let it win. She would destroy it no matter the cost. With a final, determined breath, she reached out toward the symbol. As her fingers made contact with the stone, a blinding light erupted, and for a moment, the world seemed to shudder, as if time itself had paused. And then, as the light faded, everything went still. The shaking stopped. The fog began to lift. The oppressive weight of the entity's presence was gone. Sarah stood alone in the clearing, panting, her body trembling from the effort. The town of Elowen, the entity, it had all faded into nothingness. The cycle had been broken. But as she looked around, she realized that the town was gone. Completely. There were no traces of the village, no remnants of the people who had lived there. It was as if Elowen had never existed at all. Her legs gave way beneath her, and she collapsed onto the ground, overwhelmed by the weight of what had just happened. The town, the curse, the entity, it was all over. But the cost had been high. Sarah had sacrificed everything to stop it, and now she was left with nothing. Was it worth it? She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. But there was no answer. The darkness had been lifted, but the echoes of Elowen would stay with her forever. The truth had been uncovered, the cycle broken, but Sarah had paid the ultimate price. And as the sun began to rise over the empty forest, Sarah wondered if she would ever truly escape the haunting memories of Elowen Town.